Good afternoon. I am Kim Santerre, volunteer and co-chair of the CSPC Events Committee. Welcome to today's panel, Canada's AI Advantage, Why it exists, and what it will take to scale it, organized by MeetX. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that while we are meeting virtually, we are all joining from various traditional territories across Turtle Island. I am joining you today from Quebec City, which is the traditional territory of the Wendat Nation. We recognize the enduring presence and resilience of Indigenous people across Canada and are grateful for the opportunity to gather and share knowledge on these lands. I invite our attendees to share their own land acknowledgement in the chat as we get started. We are now using Wordly to provide real-time translation for virtual panel. For live caption, click the Wordly app button on your Zoom screen. For live audio translation in English or French, please click the link we just dropped in the chat, open it in a new tab and or on your phone and mute your main Zoom window. We would love your feedback on this accessibility tool. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Eva Riddington, Vice President, Policy, Program Development and Government Relations at MeetX. Eva, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kim. And firstly, thank you so much to CSPC for the wonderful organization and support you've given for this panel. So as was mentioned, we will be taking questions through the Q&A feature in Zoom and using the chat line only to communicate any issues you happen to have as panelists or any general comments. And instead of repeating questions, we just ask the audience upvotes a question that they would like to be answered. So I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by an outstanding panel representing different parts of Canada's AI journey. I'd like to introduce the panelists now. Alyssa Strome, Executive Director of the Pan-Canadian AI Strategy of CFAR, who has played a central role in building Canada's AI ecosystem and advancing national AI leadership. Cam Linke, CEO of Alberta Machine Learning Institute, AMI, representing the connection between research, talent, and industry adoption. Margot Seltzer, core member of AI at UBC Working Group and Department Co-Head, Canada 150 Research Chair in Computer Systems and the Cheriton Family Chair in Computer Science at the University of British Columbia, bringing the perspective of academic research and the role of universities in innovation. Chad Kogar, Vice President of AI at Creative Destruction Lab, representing entrepreneurship, venture creation, and scaling AI companies. Corey Jansen, co-founder and CEO of Alta ML, sharing the perspective of AI adoption and commercialization within organizations. And last but not least, Yusuf Helva, CEO and co-founder of Fluid AI, bringing the experience of translating research into a globally scaling healthcare AI company. So welcome to all panelists, and welcome everyone else. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So nearly a decade ago, Canada made a bold decision to invest early and strategically in artificial intelligence by building strength in research excellence, talent, and collaboration. That investment helped Canada be established as one of the world's leading AI ecosystems. Today, Canada is recognized internationally for its AI research community, world-class institutes, and exceptional talent. We have helped shape the global conversation on artificial intelligence and built a foundation that few countries can match. But leadership and discovery is not the same as leadership and deployment. The next chapter of Canada's AI journey is about translating those strengths into broader impact, into productivity gains for businesses, globally competitive Canadian companies, improved public services, and meaningful benefits for all Canadians. The recently released AI for All strategy provides an important backdrop for today's discussion. It reflects an evolution in Canada's AI ambition, from building capacity and research to ensuring that those strengths translate into adoption, commercialization, economic growth, and societal benefit. Our goal today is not to review the strategy itself, but to explore the questions it raises. How do we move more effectively from research into real-world development and adoption, from talent into applied expertise, and from innovation into lasting economic value and societal impact? And perhaps most importantly, what partnerships and conditions are needed to make that happen. Because Canada's AI advantage is never built by one sector alone. It's been created through collaboration among researchers, universities, entrepreneurs, companies, investors, governments, and organizations that connect talent with opportunity. That collaborative ecosystem is something that we'll explore today. So I would like to kick things off by reflecting on some of the strengths that have really positioned Canada as a global AI leader, including research excellence, talent, and ecosystem development. So Alyssa, I'd like to turn to you for the first question. The original AI strategy focused heavily on building research excellence and talent. Looking back, where do you think Canada has exceeded expectations, and where do you think the next phase needs to look different?
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ava. What a great place for us to start the conversation because research and talent really remain today the foundation, I think, of Canada's AI ecosystem and really what we've built over almost a decade under the original Pan-Canadian AI strategy has set the stage beautifully for where we want to go in the future and the vision that's laid out in AI for All. So what did we do well? Starting back in 2016 when the Government of Canada started thinking about this, and in 2017 when CIFAR and the AI Institutes came together to implement the vision. Well, back then the vision was really focused on talent. That was really a real risk that we were facing as a nation. We'd had decades of research excellence, decades of strength and high impact contributions in the field of AI research. And we were, training many graduate students, and those leaders were, being recruited, some would say poached, to other jurisdictions, right? And so the great investments that we were making in students and trainees and advancing the science of AI, we were at risk of losing that capacity that we had, strength that we had built in Canada. So the original strategy really focused on securing our talent in Canada and securing our research excellence. And, we did that primarily through the Canada CIFAR AI Chairs program, which was really visionary in its time because there was nothing else like it in the world. And it was a really focused and strategic way for Canada to both retain the great researchers, the faculty members that we had in Canada, but also to recruit leaders from all around the world to come to Canada. So it was that talent piece, and that, of course, we were looking for the best researchers in the world as part of that strategy. So that's where the research excellence came in. And at the same time, this was a time before the AI institutes. Our AI ecosystem in Canada was really nascent. It was a series of research clusters within universities, some fledgling companies that were emerging across the country, a few organizations that were starting to pivot away from what we used to call big data and analytics and towards machine learning. And so it was a really sort of disconnected ecosystem at that time. And so the establishment of the three national AI institutes was really critical, I think, to creating central hubs that are regional in nature, that had very critical role to play in bringing research and talent together in one place, but also being that place where all components of an AI ecosystem could come together, explore, collaborate, advance AI science and its application together. And so the creation of the three national AI institutes, and in particular, the model and vision for tying it all together, and CIFAR plays and has played a key role in that. But we really see CIFAR and the three AI institutes as the partners in delivering on the original Pan-Canadian AI strategy. And so we've had a very strong partnership and collaboration, and very much a shared vision and a commitment to working together to advance our priorities together. And so doing that in a national, very coordinated, very strategic way, I think was very unique at the time. And I will just finally say that it's paid off. The approach that we've taken over the last decade really helped to establish Canada as a world leader in AI research. Our data at CFAR shows that the Canada CFAR AI chairs are the third highest impact AI research cluster in the world, behind only Google and the Max Planck Institute for Informatics, and we've got them in our sights for sure. It's been a tremendous opportunity for Canada to really strengthen our research excellence, train a whole generation of graduate students and individuals with advanced AI skills and expertise that now the AI for All strategy, I hope, will leverage and build from.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. You mentioned Canada's strengths internationally, and Margot, I wanted to turn to you to talk a bit about obviously Canada's research community and how the respect we have on the international scale. So, which research strengths are most poised to deliver economic or societal impact, and what will it take to translate those strengths into real-world outcomes?
Thank you, Eva. Oh, now you all disappeared. Okay. So I think that it's important that we separate the discussion about the societal impacts from the economic impacts, because I think we've seen cases where, some of the biggest companies in this field, the non-Canadians, let's be clear, have released tools and technologies that have not necessarily led to societal good, and in fact have led to societal harm. So let me try to decouple these just a little bit. And so when I think about the economics, I think less about specific research areas and more about sort of the messaging and strategy that we use to talk about it. So, from sitting inside the university, our students are being bombarded with messages that entry-level jobs are disappearing and they're not coming back. And I think if you step back for a minute, that's a little impractical because tomorrow's senior job holders are today's junior job holders in entry-level positions. So we've got messaging out there that we need to combat. And so I think what we need to do is think strategically about supporting the migration of the talent that we're producing, whether it's our undergraduates or our graduate students, into industry to support the needs that industry has. So, inside the university, we have been adapting frantically to try to both determine and execute on what is it that we need to be training our students so that they can be productive partners in this new AI economy. And in particular, when they leave here, we want them to be able to effectively use the tools and develop solutions that are going to make Canadian companies successful and also be able to adapt to the new tools that are going to emerge next week or next month or next year. Because as rapid as the computer technology field has emerged over the last 20 or 30 years, the rapidity with which the AI field is changing and evolving is really unprecedented. And we need to make sure that we're producing students who can adapt to those changes. And so I think right now what we've got is a little bit of a bifurcation, and we have programs that are really great at placing students who are currently students into companies. So I'm thinking about Mitex programs, co-ops, internships, and that's great. We also have programs that are helping companies find the right talent to hire. So I'm thinking about the Digital Skills for Youth, which targets people under 30 and tries to help companies find those people and bring them in. But there's a gap between the programs we have in the universities and the programs we have in the companies. And I think figuring out how to bridge those two together and really connect them in a way that will continue to, make sure that the young people do know that in order to become senior engineers, there are jobs to help them do that, or developers, or the people who are going to market these new products. So I think that sort of is the key to facilitating the transfer from the universities of all the talent we're developing into the companies. And, let's be clear, there is a lot of enthusiasm from our students at all levels about wanting to do something new and start companies and be entrepreneurs. And we need to be able to support that at a very grassroots level. Right now, the first thing I hear from students is, well, if I want to do something, like, I have to go to Silicon Valley. And I think we need to change that messaging, right? We need them to know that there is an ecosystem in Canada and that they can have an impact here, and perhaps they can have an even bigger impact here. And so we need to, keep them here and let them, we really want to harness all that enthusiasm, I think. So that sort of speaks to the economic side. And so I want to give the societal side a piece of the action too. And I come from a very biased position. So I want to be very clear about that. My own research in AI focuses on interpretable AI. So, if you listen to what the buzz is, it seems that the advice for any solution you need to do requires, a bigger, more complex model. And in some cases, that's really great, right? Chatbots are not going to be built out of simple models. But at the same time, in some of the most societally critical areas, so I'm thinking about finance or healthcare, big complex models that you can't explain aren't necessarily what we want. And the thought experiment I always run is, if you go to your doctor and your doctor says, take drug X, and you say, why? And they say, because the model told me so. I don't know about you, but that doesn't leave me with a warm, fuzzy feeling. If instead the doctor can say, well, actually, here are exactly the symptoms, and here's why we're making a decision. So there's also a good side to these simpler models, which is that they don't place the sustainability or resource demands that these current big models make. So I think there's a real opportunity there for us to think about some of these really societally sensitive areas where we can have an impact. And those happen to be areas where Canada's quite well poised. And figure out how to actually really build those out. We can do that with sovereign compute facilities today. We don't have to build huge data centers to do that. And I think it really gives us a sort of end run around what some of the, behemoths in the industry are doing. Let's see, I'm just going to peek at my own notes here. So I think that's all I really wanted to say right now, and maybe I'll jump back in later depending on where we go.
Thanks a lot, Margot. So you talked about, offering students a path to stay. And Chad, I wanted to jump over to you and see about your experience with Creative Destruction Lab, obviously working with some of Canada's most promising AI ventures. So from your perspective, working with AI founders and ventures, what distinguishes the companies that successfully scale from those that struggle to move beyond early innovation?
The key thing is relentless customer focus. That really defines whether a company hits product market fit and then can scale up. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen all these great inventions that just end up sitting on a shelf because what the founders thought it should be applied to was actually something that nobody wanted. Two things underlie that. First is just like legitimate access to customers, especially in Canada. Lots of companies are hesitant to adopt new technologies and especially to buy from small companies. I was part of the early team at an AI and robotics company called Kindred. Started here in Canada. We had about 30 machine learning PhDs when we were scaling up. And we would have loved to have Canadian customers. And instead, me and one of the head engineers were going all around the US to all these different small towns, meeting with distribution centers for large American companies because none of the Canadian companies would come to the table. So one of the consistent messages that we're trying to push for policymakers and when working with companies is you need to start adopting these tools. And how do we get companies to adopt tools from small companies? A lot of that comes to peer sharing and trying to help create a model that they can work together with small companies that they can limit the risk. Aside from access to customers, a relentless customer focus also requires better prioritization. And that's part of why the lab, Creative Destruction Lab, was started. Our ideal founder is someone who's like a great science founder with a great technology and they don't quite know where to apply it yet. So we pair them with mentors who have done that process in the past. And there's an art to it. But trying to find the application for your technology that's going to actually add value for customers is really important. And just taking that feedback in and openness to iterating is really key for being able to scale up and get product market fit.
Okay, thank you very much, Chad. So I think from the panelists' comments, we can see we've built quite a remarkable foundation. The question is really now how we turn that foundation into broader impact. So I'd like to explore some of the challenges of moving from discovery to deployment, commercialization, adoption, partnerships, and really what are the conditions that we need to scale impact. So Cam, I'd like to turn to you. Canada has invested heavily in connecting research, talent, and industry. Where does that transition still break down? And why is moving from discovery to adoption so difficult?
Yeah, so I guess a couple pieces on it. So the first, and I think there's somewhat things that have been mentioned already, is that, Canada's a lot of SMEs, or a lot of companies in regulated industries. If they haven't done things in the area before, then a first project in machine learning's at times a hill to climb. For us, we kind of focus early on hand-holding pieces on both sides of that. On the talent side, that's their first kind of connection into industry, and on the industry side, if that's their first kind of project overall. So, for us, that's a big piece. That hand-holding piece. The second part, and we focus a lot on this at AIME, is literacy. The literacy around AI in Canada is exceedingly low. And it's even worse when you look at small businesses or businesses period in Canada. So that part's a challenge and something that just overall we focus on kind of moving the needle, and anything we can do to help change the trajectory around AI literacy in the country is really important. The last one, and this is just kind of overall, Chad mentioned it, Margot, I think, slightly mentioned it. We're really bad at investing and being customers of stuff here in the country. Now, part of it's just, I guess, if you're not adopting anything in AI, then you're probably not going to be doing anything more advanced. So that part's difficult, but we're really bad at as a country. And if all of your customers are somewhere else and all of your investors are somewhere else, what are the odds that your company isn't also going to get moved somewhere else as well? And, I think we just have to recognize that as a country. There's some structural things like, we like to create oligopolies, here in the country, so that doesn't help. And we're all a lot of SMEs, which don't typically have budgets to be able to do these things. And then we like to use our, government purchasing power to buy from everywhere else, rather than to buy from ourselves. So you kind of stack all of those on top of each other, and you create a situation where, likely nobody's going to be adopting from Canadian companies. Meanwhile, we like to wait to see, especially what's been done south of the border. Those companies are a year ahead in adopting. And, the startup community ends up coalescing around those companies because they're also adopting earlier companies. So by the time we even get to start something up here, we're a year behind a company in the US or elsewhere. So all those just kind of compound on each other, and make, the commercialization, like, I don't think it's about trying to get something out of the lab into the market in the kind of traditional commercialization sense. It's that loop of, customers and capital being able to make a ready ecosystem for adoption, and we're not great at that here.
Thanks very much, Cam. Corey, I'd like to move to you next. So Chad mentioned literacy being a challenge, knowing your customer. From your experience working with organizations, what is one of the biggest barriers to adopting AI today? Would you say talent, cost, risk, organizational readiness, or something else?
I would echo most of what Cam said there. I totally agree with the general theme of what he was getting at. I think you could take risk and really talk about mindset. And so I guess the answer to that question depends on who's asking. If you're talking to a government policymaker, I think that we have a great stump speech from the Prime Minister right now. What we're seeing in market is that government as a first customer, the systems aren't necessarily there yet, in terms of actually being able to follow this vision. And so being able to provide those right sandboxes where we can compete. And I don't want any more grants. I don't want any more government programs. I don't want just let us compete for a contract, right? Because there's a regulatory capture piece where, frankly, big multinationals are coming in and we're just giving all the money to the Americans, like just full stop. And so if we're going to go elbows up, okay, let's actually have the procurement vehicles, let's have the paths to be able to get in along those lines. If we're talking to the private sector, I'm seeing over the last 6 months, especially, CEOs and executives everywhere are now leaning in, and they don't know how to take the first step. We don't do the research, we don't build frontier models, we don't want to be in that game. Frankly, I don't want to try to take any research from any PSI and take that externally, right? I want all the great kids that are coming and studying under the PIs that are AME fellows and in Waterloo. We'll compete in those markets. We can't compete in Montreal. We can't, compete at the U of T. But UBC, U of A, and Waterloo, people kind of forget that this is not just a Toronto and Montreal story. So we have exceptional talent. I just want to be able to get close to those researchers. Let's support the researchers, but then on the actual implementation side, the market has spoken. You've seen with both OpenAI and Anthropic launching their DeployCos, right? Putting billions of dollars into a strategy saying off-the-shelf models, LMs on their own, don't do anything, right? And really off-the-shelf doesn't work. On the other side, we could just give money to the big consulting firms and they'll change order you to death. There's a model in the middle where startups in the ecosystem can come in and build IP that stays in Canadian hands. But it's being able to actually let the private sector make those right decisions. Are there foundational elements that the government can do in terms of laying out so to make it easier, whether that's a accelerated depreciation or providing some incentives to be able to move faster? 100%. But I think if we fall into that oligopoly trap and just say government's going to pick the winners, it doesn't matter even government is the procurement vehicle. If you've kind of just said we're just going to create one or two companies, then we're not going to have a thriving AI ecosystem. We need hundreds, thousands of companies playing in the space. So that policymaker would heavily encourage them to say, let's make it so that we don't just put it all on the AI institutes. Let's give the AI institutes more money to bring in the best researchers from around the world, focus on educational literacy, right? But not force Vector and Mila and Amy to have to be in charge of all of commercialization and hold them accountable for the results in the Canadian economy. That's a very difficult, in fact, I'd say impossible task, right? Figure out a way to let the private sector lead and put incentives along those lines rather than trying to actually dictate it from Ottawa.
Sorry, I just wanted to chime in really quickly, other than fully agree with everything Corey
More
said.
money.
Giving more
and the more money part, right?
The more money part, totally agree. I just want, because this comes up a lot when we talk about buying from Canadian companies. This isn't about buying worse. A lot of Canadian companies very, very regularly win competitive RFPs external to Canada, and then they're not even able to compete on those RFPs in Canada. And so this isn't buy the whatever the Canadian version of Microsoft Word is, just to have something local. It's actually leveling the playing field so that Canadian companies can compete for Canadian deals, which right now, in many cases, it doesn't happen.
Thank you very much, Corey and Cam. So speaking of figuring out a way to make the private sector succeed, Yusuf, I'd like to turn to you. So Fluid AI represents the journey from research to commercialization and global deployment. So looking back in your experience, what made that transition possible? And what should Canada do to make that path easier for the next generation of companies?
Yeah, so for us, our journey has been an interesting one, and we've learned a lot along the way. The key thing that we were looking at as a company, and the key thing we focus on, is how do we transition our abilities, our talents, our products, what we're developing here, and how do we scale it, and how do we implement it and put it in the customer's hand in ways that make sense to the customer, in ways that leverage our advantages, in ways where the utility of our systems and our AI advantage leads to, true financial outcomes and operational improvements for the customer and for the user. So for us as well. So we've tried to come up with what we did, and just in preparation for this panel, tried to understand what we did well and where we went wrong, and put some thoughts together. The one thing that stood out for us in terms of what made us special is we worked very closely with our customers. And when I say very closely, I mean we worked with clinical customers, we worked with hospitals. So we got our engineers, we got our incredible talent coming out of Waterloo, Hamilton, Toronto, Vancouver, and we put them in these clinical facilities, research facilities, to understand their workflows, to figure out their needs, to start implementing solutions in ways that made sense to the user. And we did this both locally and internationally as well. So we've worked with the world's leading hospitals, the Clevelands, the Mayos, the UHNs, and tens of other clinical institutions. And one of the key advantages that we have, and sometimes this goes just under the radar or it's not recognized, people treat Canadian talent and Canadian AI as a trustworthy place to, or a trustworthy position to work with and interact with. So we always walk in with that level of trust, that level of specialty, which is very well respected in the industry. And when you go to something like a regulated healthcare environment, this is a very strong position. And this respect is earned. I know, you go to all of the top hospitals in the US, Canadian talent is very well respected. The Canadian residents, fellows are all well respected. So we need to leverage where we stand out. And if we can't compete on the frontier models, if you can't compete with the Claudes, the OpenAIs, then let's compete in areas where we know and we've earned people's respect, and this respect has been earned and developed over many, many years. And one of it is, privacy, security, quality of research that comes out of things, price compared to our US counterparts. Like, we have areas where we will naturally win. And if we lean into our advantages, we're going to dominate in certain sectors. And if this means we start our dominance in well-regulated sectors, and that's our starting point, so be it. And that has been our success story. And we've been doing this across the border in the US. We've been doing this internationally as well, across Europe, Gulf, Middle East. All of these are areas where we are constantly viewed in a very positive light. So that's just something just a point I wanted to mention. I have other points as well, but for the sake of time as well, we can cover them throughout the discussion. But that should get us started.
Thank you very much, Yusuf. So we talked a little bit about where we are today, some of the challenges moving from discovery to deployment. I would like to focus on what Canada needs next, what we need to scale, what models are working, and what success should look like over the next 5 years. So Alyssa, I'll turn it back to you. So Canada now has the AI for All strategy as the next chapter of this journey. What will determine whether we are talking about a sustained Canadian AI advantage 5 years from now or a missed opportunity?
Yeah, and it's a great question, because I approach this question really building on the conversation that we've had already here today. So, I think what we need to do to be successful in the next 5 years, honestly, is to really effectively leverage and mobilize the talent that is being generated through our universities, our post-secondary institutions all across the country. Just as an example, the community that I know best is the Candidacy for AI Chairs program. We're at 150 chairs right now. They're training right now today 2,200 graduate students across the 3 AI institutes across the country. So these are, we graduate 250 master's and PhD students every year in really, really advanced AI. And to be successful in the next 5 years, we need to prepare not just those graduates, but all of the students that are coming out of AI programs, AI related programs, AI adjacent programs, and really help prepare them for jobs in Canada, right? And so that means programs like MyTax, which is very heavily used by the Cheers program. It's very heavily used by companies that are focused on AI, but we need to be able to do that even more effectively at scale. And I think this really means that we need a multi-sectoral effort, right? So those of us in post-secondary education, in research, need to be working collaboratively with industry, with the startup ecosystem, with the public sector as well too, to understand and strategize how we can prepare our trainees to take up jobs in AI in Canada, and how we can prepare those organizations to receive that talent as well too, right? And so we have some great examples and some really, really good role models for how this has been done already very effectively in Canada. Yusuf's explanation and approach in Fluid AI is a great example of how to embed the talent, how to have them work hand in hand with the receptor or deployer of the technology. But we've seen it be very effective, for instance, in the financial sector, right? So like examples like RBC and Manulife, these are Canadian companies who are the best in the world in deploying AI within their own sector. They're ranking third in the world or fifth in the world in either banking or insurance. And they did that by hiring talent and building AI labs within their organizations and having those talented individuals work hand in hand with the domain experts, with the deployers of the technology, the people who are solving particular business problems in order to develop solutions. So those are examples from finance, but we have lots of examples from the healthcare sector. And we need to think about how we do that in all of the other sectors that are critical to Canada's economy. And so I think that will be the difference between success and failure in the next 5 years, how we can leverage that expertise and, very importantly, keep it in Canada.
Thanks very much, Alyssa. Cam, I'll move to a question, a bit of a follow-up from Alyssa's. So the talk about the need to be able to scale and to share across Canada. So if we know what models are working to connect talent, research, and industry, what practical barriers still prevent us from scaling those models across the country?
Yeah, I mean, I guess part is like I'm not sure all of them are working. So there's that as its own challenge. I mean, at times in Canada, we don't like doubling down on things that work. So like, hey, this is going well, let's like juice it up. We like a ribbon cutting's like better. Like you get to announce a new thing, or like, hey, this program isn't working. So, but like two people are going to be really loud about it if we kill it. So I guess we'll keep it going for a while. We're not good at those. And when the framing of the discussion, sometimes I have a challenge with of like, okay, well, let's move on from like winning at research, and now we need to focus on deployment as an example. Like we need to think about aligned ands in these things. Like we need to be really great at research. The rest of the world is investing very heavily in that, and the places that are winning are investing very heavily in that. We need to be very great at startup creation, and the places that are best in the world are great at startup creation. We need our large companies adopting, right? So these are all ands that have to happen, not like ors, like, hey, we're fine on that, but now we need to move over to this thing here. And so when you look at that, then you also need to say, what are aligned programs that are working, that have shown to demonstrate results that we can back and double down on to be able to accelerate what's working. And that's a thing that we're just typically not willing to do the like harsh math on as a country to really move the needle. And so it's not like any specific program that I'd say, well, like this or that we like should or shouldn't do. It's like overall as a mentality, we have to do that, and we should be reviewing these things regularly. Like AI's when did ChatGPT come out? 2022, 2023, somewhere around there. I mean, we're like less than 5 years out. So 5-year cycles on these things for reviews don't work. So to me, it's more about aligned, regular reviews and the ability to iterate, change, and improve. I'll give one example, but I won't name the program. That was like a AI co-invest program. The typical cycle on it was 9 to 12 months for a project to get approved through that. I mean, the technology changes in 9 to 12 months, and your competitor is way ahead of you, but it needed to go through, 3 to 6 months of internal reviews. You need to time it up to get to whatever the org's next board meeting was. And then hopefully you didn't have any revisions from there. We can't do these things. We need to be looking at moving quickly, being aligned, and then being able to review and iterate from there to be successful.
Yeah, Ava, maybe I can build on that because Alyssa said something that I totally agree with, and maybe I'd have a bit of a kind of build on her comments. The future of AI is all about focus. It is all about no one wants AI. No one wants to buy AI. No one gives a shit. What they want is they want you to solve their problem, right? And so you can talk about what that looks like in the difference in the healthcare system versus say in the private sector, but we're putting all of our investment dollars into like the blue collar economy. So we think we can be best in the world at construction, engineering, industrial, right? As we think of, we like to look south of the border and think that they're all free market capitalism and this neoliberal, but they actually have industrial policy, right? Why don't we take and focus that? And so as we're starting to build this and say we can be best in the world, whether it's we're going to make a big bet in health, we're going to make a big bet in finance, we're going to make a big bet in natural resources, and really specialize there. And with this can get into the sovereignty debate and defense and all that, where we could specialize as well. I really love the missions aspect of the AI for All plan, but I looked and I said, first of all, I think we're kind of re-announcing a program. Like Vital's been out for a while. I don't know how much was actually new money there. We're not going to solve the health problems in the healthcare system for $200 million. Like we could save tens of billions of dollars if we actually leaned into this in a big way. If we actually went in and said, hey, we're going to create the right policy framework so that you have to use AI, right? And Billy, on Margot's comments beforehand, maybe you're not replacing the human, you're empowering the clinician to make a better decision. I actually think that at some point in the future, our kids are going to be like, it's going to be medical malpractice to not double check your work through an AI tool, right? And so empowering and having that AI tied into that workflow and going deep into that area, that's going to be the future for health. If we actually had the leadership from the top to say, like, we're going to be best in the world at this, that would give me a ton more optimism about where we're going to go over the next 5 years, right? Because we can be the best in the world at a few things, but not across the board.
Thanks so much. Thanks for those additional insights. I really like the future of AI is focus. I think that's a powerful statement. Yusuf, I'll turn to you. What partnership support model or ecosystem advantage helped Fluid AI grow that you believe should become more common across Canada?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'll start with the local ones. But I do have to say, and I'll preface by saying we had also great success with the international ones as well. So I'll start with the local ones, and I'll say where we really benefited, and I'll divide them up into their different categories. First of all, on the talent side, Fluid AI is closely associated with the University of Waterloo, which gave us access to incredible talent. If you look at San Francisco hires, that some of these top tier companies that we're mentioning and talking about, and if you look at their hiring patterns, you'll find that the number one location where they've hired, where they've brought in talent, has been from the University of Waterloo. And it's by a massive margin, even compared to other universities in the US. And we're based here. We're based in Kitchener-Waterloo. we've had the unfair advantage, and I'll call it an unfair advantage, of having access to these talents fresh out of school. We get to reach out to them. We get to bring them on board. These are people who are top of their class. They want to stay in the city. We have the opportunity to present them with incredible challenges. We grow together. It's been incredible. And there's an ecosystem here in which we're able to leverage in between the Velocity ecosystem, the MITS ecosystem, and then top it off with some very good, based on our specialization, medical talent coming out of UFT, coming out of Hamilton. So the Hamilton Health Services, the UHNs, the Unity Healths, the Westerns, all of these are less than an hour away, which we're able to leverage talent. This is a very, very strong ecosystem for us. And then on the international stage, it becomes a lot more interesting. So one of our strongest, most valuable partnerships is with Mayo Clinic. And Mayo being Mayo, they have access to large amounts of data. If you're building AI, if you're building machine learning models, you need data, you need access to information, and that ultimately means you need to scale beyond the Canadian ecosystem, where our population is 35 to 40 million people. No matter how big or active our healthcare institutions are or connected these systems are, it's a numbers game, and sometimes internationally you're able to access some of these numbers in a more readily accessible fashions. And sometimes international institutions also had this infrastructure built years ago, and it made sense for us to build some of the partnerships there. So we've worked with the Texas Medical Center, we worked with Mayo Clinic, we worked with Cleveland Clinic. We have very tight relationships there. And these international systems gave us a bunch of different things, from the data that helped us build the models, to the workflows, to the way medicine gets practiced, to credibility internationally. All of these are things that we've done on an international scale that helped us flourish. These are the top two partnerships that we've benefited from. We've benefited from a number of other partnerships as well, between research partnerships, access to funding from the things like NSERC, the MyTaxes, the other institutions that helped us finance some of the developments that we're doing, to local assistance with manufacturing, talent development, research. All of these are things that we've leveraged over the years. And we've also partnered up with some of the universities, research labs as well, that are developing some of the frontier research. That has also been very beneficial for us. So these are the categories of, I would say, researchers or partners that helped us develop Fluid AI to what it is today.
Ava, can I just jump in and add something to that reflects my experience, but it also reflects what I'm hearing from both Yusuf and Corey, and that the critical element, the sort of like recipe for success here, is having like really challenging, interesting, compelling problems to work on. So both for the talent, we know that to keep talent engaged in the field, engaged in a sector, engaged in Canada, they need to have really important problems that align with their values, give them an intellectual challenge, give them a technical challenge. That's what trainees are looking for. And likewise, as Corey said, companies in Canada, organizations in Canada, they have hard problems. And this is where AI can help to solve those hard problems. And so that's the beautiful synergy when we're looking at, what do trainees need? What does our talent need to be successful in Canada? And what do companies need to be successful in Canada? The common thread there is really, deploying AI to solve these really interesting and important challenges.
Thanks so much, Yusuf. Happy to always hear about the MyTech support. And Alyssa, thank you for adding. I think we clearly hear the importance, again, of our academic institutions and the need for talent for our universities. So, Margot, universities have played a central role in Canada's AI success. How do they evolve from producing world-class research and talent to becoming even stronger partners in innovation and commercialization?
Thanks. I want to build on Cam's, yes and philosophy, because I think that not only does it apply to our alignment, it actually applies to everything that's been said. So, earlier, Alyssa mentioned, the programs that our students are going to come out of, but I'm going to switch it and say all the programs that students are going to come out of are AI programs, right? It might be sociology and AI or history and AI. I don't think we can name any field of human inquiry that is not going to be influenced from AI. And, we're already seeing this today. We, bring together a community of learning about AI, and we have, 50 scholars from across campus in, 10 different faculties and 20 different departments. So I think the educational system is already starting to reflect this. And so the talent is going to be there. And there's a little bit of a matchmaking problem that we have to do. But I think there's something even deeper there, which is that the problems that companies have are specific to their company, right? The same approach that I'm going to take talking to a mining company is really quite different from what it would do to take to a health organization. And we can't expect that it's the AI expert's job that they're going to have to master all of these. And so, one of my colleagues, Kevin Leighton Brown, has been talking about this TRIO model, which really says, universities have experts who do AI, but they also have experts who are experts in medicine or mining. And so we need to think more broadly about who are the people that we're reaching out to and how do we bring them together so that we really, really are getting the yes and that Cam was talking about, right? It's not just about the technology. It's really about the technology in the service of a real problem. And those real problems have real domains. And I'm going to go back to something that I think Yusuf said in the first round, which is, every problem, every solution fails when it first meets contact with the customer. And so embedding both the domain experts and the technology experts with the customer is absolutely crucial. Some of my closest friends in this life are customers at, our first company because we grew so close solving their problems. And I think that we need to facilitate that. And this next advance for us is really going to involve a whole new conceptual model about where the boundary is between the industry and the students and the companies, because the technology is moving so quickly, we can't have these 9-month project cycles that Cam was talking about, right? That's just not going to cut it. At the same time, we're talking about domains where move fast and break things is also not going to be a viable solution. And so I think we really need to think about this more as a collaboration where we've got technologists, we've got the trainees, we've got the domain specialists, and then we've got the people who have these really hard problems that we need to solve. And it's going to have to be a collaboration that looks very different than what we've seen in the past.
Thanks very much, Margot. Chad, I did want to have you comment on, obviously the AI for All strategy places huge emphasis on scaling Canadian companies. So what is the single biggest change that would help more Canadian AI ventures become global leaders?
I already spoke about Canadian organizations adopting AI more. And I think that's by far the biggest thing. So maybe I'll double click on kind of 2 specific areas where we might be able to win and create value on a global scale. I think about 2 types of AIs as large buckets from here. So productivity AIs and opportunity AIs. Productivity AIs are create time savings essentially, so capture value more efficiently. Opportunity AIs are creating value that didn't exist before, largely in kind of unknown question areas, like we don't know how to solve a certain disease or something like that. In the productivity space, you can think healthcare, public service, and others. Each of these are areas where Canada's scale and international reputation may be a huge advantage for us. So we have large internal markets for things like healthcare. Startups can develop solutions locally, scale them up within the country, have access to lots of data, and then scale internationally. As Yusuf said, we're among the most trusted countries. And so other countries may be more willing to adopt our solutions. So those are spaces where we can win. And we're also differentiated from the United States. So for example, in healthcare, a lot of the AI work is going into kind of billing type of questions. And the focus on AI here is very different. We're focused more on clinical and administrative, other types of clinical efficiency. So we need to find ways for the Canadian healthcare and public service organizations to experiment with these tools. And building on Corey's comment, it's not just about money. It's about having the right policies in place that remove bias towards the large multinationals and allow sandboxes for experimentation. The second area, so AI, opportunity AIs, I think AI for science is going to be a huge area. And to build on Margot's point, every program is becoming an AI program. We have a highly trained workforce. We have very strong performance in science, generally, not just in AI. And AI tools are already dramatically enhancing scientific efforts. So can we find ways to get the science community to adopt these tools? Can we help train them? Can we encourage and incentivize scientists across Canada to leverage AI so they can start developing fluency with the tools and start to get, greater output in the scientific realm where we're already strong. So those are two areas where I think we can try to compete on a global scale.
And I just want to maybe I misspoke. To me, it's actually all about the money. Yes, there's policy things, right? So to me, how do you keep Canadians in Canada? You pay them more, right? And so maybe that's beyond the scope of this conversation, but like the one positive thing in AI for all was like, the ability to reinvest and tie back in, that's huge. If you sell a company as an entrepreneur, you get your first 10 million free. Here, it's like a couple million of not even like Canadian pesos. The Canadian peso, again, so I'm 35% less than my US colleagues. Well, we're not losing many employees to, and I think we're one of the biggest users of MyTax for a company of our size in terms of like the amount we take versus like total employee count. We can have one of the best. I'd like to hope we have one of the best first jobs in data science in the country. And then after 2 or 3 years, in every instance, like they get poached by a US firm. And so to me, it's actually, yes, there's always policy things, but I think we'll get people say here, if we have a stronger economy, if we have lower taxes, the tax base is a big issue, the capital gains treatment, the treatment on stock options. Anyway, sorry, I just not to jump in, but like, so I'll just apologize to the listeners. I answered a few questions in the Q&A and they went to the answer queue. So my apologies to those that went through. I wasn't meaning to like take their question away.
No, I appreciate it. So I will say I want to jump into just a quick lightning round at the end before we open up to some of that Q&A. So what I want to pose to all of the panelists is, imagine that we are here in 2031. What is one headline that you would hope to read about Canada's AI ecosystem? I'll choose the person who goes off mute first to give you a second to think about it.
I'll jump in. So I'm going to build on a little bit what Corey said, but I think that the opportunities in healthcare, we have so many advantages over our neighbors to the south in healthcare because we have access to data. So I think the headline in 2031 is AI researcher at UBC, has figured out how to cure your favorite disease. And we're deploying solutions like this across the country, and our, lifespans are greater and happier.
Thanks, Margot. $2031, Chad.
For me, it'd be something about Canadian companies overtaking the world. And so I want to hear not just about one Canadian company going public, but 20 or more sort of thing. So how can we have more winners becoming really successful as they scale their products across the world?
I'll jump in. When I think of one of the areas we haven't talked about where Canada does very poorly right now, but is a real focus of the AI for All strategy, that's trust and public engagement around AI, right? And so If we can do one thing right over the next 5 years, it would be to see Canadians' trust in AI increase, and that will not just be based on the government's efforts, but it's actually has to be a across the board, across the ecosystem effort to engage more effectively with the public in the conversation around AI, build AI literacy, as Cam has talked about, and to give them the chance to learn how to use and benefit from these tools.
Imagine a world in which entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley were moving back to Canada because we completely changed our mindset towards entrepreneurship, and AI was a uniting factor across the country, that you can make more, your take home pay is more in Calgary or Toronto than anywhere across the United States. And this is truly the best place to build because we have utilized our core assets in terms of this base on research, but also translated that to the rest of the economy. We've got more natural resources than the rest of the world. Imagine if we could actually build new power plants. Imagine if this could be the place in the world where we could use hydro, nat gas, and even nuclear, right, to be able to actually power, so that this was the place. Imagine if there was the data centers that you see in Texas locally here in Canada, and we became a nexus where you had to be here because of those assets that we have on the ground.
Cam, Yusuf, any thoughts for 2031, or we'll just let it happen and talk then?
Canada is the fastest growing AI ecosystem in the world.
Yusuf, last but not least.
I'll hold on for this one.
Not a problem. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of the formal question period. Thank you very much for that lightning round. I know we have quite a few questions in the Q&A, but first, I believe we are launching a poll. So if CSPC can give us a help, there's a demographic poll. We'd like you to just answer these 3 questions, please. Okay. I'm hoping I can move on to some of the questions. So thank you very much for people using the Q&A function. So I'll choose some of these questions. Firstly, I hear a lot about the lack of AI literacy in Canada. Could you elaborate more on that? How are you measuring AI literacy? Who would like to take this one?
So also, I think that this is such a great question, because I kind of chuckled a little bit in the after all, where we're like, my daughter's at McGill, right? And at Christmas, she came home and she was showing me how she was using just off-the-shelf AI tools as her study buddy. And I'm like, I just don't understand how the post-secondary system is going to move fast enough. I'm not worried about that cohort, right? I am. And to me, the literacy questions actually ties into sovereignty. So we're creating all these saying, okay, we need AI to be sovereign. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean data residency? Does that mean ownership by a Canadian company? Does that mean the infrastructure? Does that mean the agentic stack? And so I think there's a huge role for the institutes here where it comes to going a little bit deeper, so both policymakers and the public sector and private sector users have a deeper understanding of what that actually means. Because as you get into it, you start saying, okay, we can be sovereign. Give me your definition. And that definition doesn't yet exist. So I think sovereignty can move beyond the usage of consumer-facing tools, because it's going to move so fast that it's going to be tough for the post-secondaries to keep up, right? Into some of the more deeper issues around regulation and what this actually means to actually control our own destiny. That, to me, is the most important definition of sovereignty. We don't want some orange guy somewhere in the world shutting down our systems. That just doesn't work, right? Fable was a gift. Let's use Fable and what's happening there because it moves beyond the theoretical from the Cloud Act and the dangers to our data. I don't really think that the White House wants access to our health data, but all of a sudden, if you have a critical system that's tied to a model that all of a sudden can be turned off, well, that puts us at risk, right? Let's improve literacy so we go deeper in what it actually takes to get that business outcome, right? And not just the usage of a tool.
Any other comments on data literacy? Okay, next question. The focus on research talent is important, but not enough. What are we doing to address roles across the AI development lifecycle, from ideation to beyond deployment?
I could take this. I agree with the state, by the way. We're very good in general, and this is across sectors. Canada is very, very good at producing incredible talents from at a foundational level. We're incredible. To take it to the end, you have to understand what it takes to deploy, to be with the customers, to how do you make money. I'm sorry to go back to this point as well, but you need to be making your customers value money so you're able to exchange it. And I mean, I'm talking from the private sector here perspective. You have to be offering value. And when you offer value, you have to take everything from A to Z. You can't just be at the research level, working in the research lab. Nothing against it. Push things to the limits, but ultimately as well, sometimes you just need to be with the customer. And I'll just talk to a story that we've seen last week. I was with the customer, working through some of the labs, and they had some very, very big problem that they were looking to tackle. And I went in, I'm walking in with my lens, my understanding, my clinical framework of, the most advanced models we're going to deploy to solve this inherent problem that's impacting, over 30,000 patients in one jurisdiction or in one region. And I go in, and the problem is so fundamental, so basic that it could be resolved with Excel macros. You don't need to bring to the best of the best to solve it. And this is tens of millions of dollars in opportunities that could be done just at a foundational level. And if you're able to even deploy something that's more advanced, the amount of value extraction that you should be able to get there will be incredible. And the only way you'll be able to do this and understand this is to be with the customer, to understand their needs, to understand what needs to be done, and to offer value. And this value will ultimately translate into business, and this business will move the cycle. It'll move the engine, and you'll be able to grow. Anyhow, it's a cycle. And the way the cycle moves is to engage customers, generate value for the customer, generate money. Money moves talents. Money secures talent. Money enables things to grow. There's a lot there. I'll stop.
Okay, thank you, Yusuf. Next question. How do we have data sovereignty so that our data and talent remain in Canada, build trust in AI, and increase AI literacy when communities are rejecting data centers to protect their environment?
I'd love to jump in on this one. We've talked about, I mentioned, and the AI for All strategy mentions both building trust and AI literacy, but where it's a little bit less explicit is on public engagement, right? And so, we've not done a great job in Canada over the last decade and even before that in engaging Canadians in the conversation around AI. There are a few sort of shining examples where Canada was an early leader in thinking about how do we have actually like public and inclusive conversations about what AI means to us as a society. How do we feel about the development of the technology? What's our vision for how AI is going to impact our society? And that's a place that I think we really need to do better on going forward, right? So part of building trust, and in order to build trust with Canadians, we need to include them in the conversation. So we need more fora for public consultation, not just consultation, but like conversation. More opportunities to hear from Canadians, more opportunities to gauge their opinions and their perspective on things. And that goes with literacy. Like you need to actually be able to understand AI in order to be able to have an informed opinion about it. And so the two go hand in hand. And of course, we're a democratic country and people have the right to protest for sure. But I think if we can have more conversations about the risks and the benefits and the opportunities and the challenges, we'll be able to advance the trust and the literacy alongside with the public engagement.
Yeah, and let's get the facts out there, right? The modern data centers don't use more water, right? A fast food outlet uses more water, right? So it's just a factual inaccuracy. The vast majority of data centers have behind the fence power, so it's actually increasing ability to the grid, right? I think we really need to build that trust, we need to also have a frank conversation with foreign interference. If you look at a lot of the BS that's being put out, it's tracing back to our adversaries, right? And if we get the facts out and we have that real conversation about where are you getting this from, right? And so frankly, I think one of the best uses of AI is from a media perspective, really identifying where we have foreign interference trying to interfere in our politics, right? Because and where we have foreign funders that are actually paying protesters to this stuff that is just completely factually inaccurate. The prime minister's right. We need to double or triple our electrical grid, right? We should have an abundance of power. Let's look at what they're doing in China, right? And how much more we're going to need more electricity regardless, right? We need to make this the easiest place to build that infrastructure. The most important asset of the world is going to be to be able to have these data centers, and that should be as important as the railway was 150 years ago.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. And some of this is like everything everywhere all at once. Like Alyssa's right. We need to have discussions about this and we need people to feel like they have some agency around it. I think a lot of young people feel like this is all just happening to them. They're big decisions made by everybody else and they get to have no agency or no discussion in it. Meanwhile, the supposed leaders of the area are writing books like if anyone builds it, we all die. Like we're really great at marketing in this industry. Awesome. So I think like we do need to do that. At the same time, we do need to deal with foreign disinformation. It is a problem. At the same time, we need to be intentional about things, which I think, there was a recent data center announcement here just north of the city. It's in an industrial area. Like I get it when you see some of these things that went up south of the border and somebody saying like, this is right next door to me. This is really loud. I don't like this. If we can be intentional about these things, we have areas that are already running massive amounts of equipment and know how to monitor them extremely well. Great, let's double down on those areas and let's build more and more in them. But that takes intentionality for us to do it. And I'm just going to come back to the last point I'm going to beat the crap out of. We need to be buying from our companies here because that's what helps solve the skill problem beyond just getting something out of the lab. All the AI designers and UX designers and every like little job around AI, not little, but like every other job around AI often gets trained and is a new thing that's sprung up around a company. Well, if we don't have those companies here, none of those jobs spring up here. And that means nobody's coffee shop is being, frequented by people from an AI company, and no company down the street is the one that solved the heart pump problem for their grandpa in the hospital. So they don't see that there. Like these things all compound on each other, because in a lot of cases we're just not being intentional about them. And this to me is a really big thing. Being customers to our own startups, to our own solutions matters a ton. Being intentional about what we do around data centers matters a ton, and being intentional about the conversations that we have and leading in those conversations matters a lot. And we have is everything everywhere all at once. We have to do all of them.
Thank you very much for those answers. Next question. Given the national mandate to bridge the discovery to deployment gap, how are regional funding vectors prioritizing applied compliance and workforce training models that embed talent directly into industrial operations rather than academic silos?
I actually think it's a little bit too early to tell, how the new AI for all strategy is going to direct the ecosystem towards this goal. I think we don't have all the information on this yet. I think we've all talked about today the need to do this, to provide those opportunities and those bridges for the talent to be directly embedded within companies, within organizations. And we have lots of great examples historically across Canada, but we need to build something that is, to Cam's point, much more intentional. It needs to be really, really well coordinated across the country as a national effort, and very strategic, very focused. Again, these are themes that have come up throughout our conversation today, but I think it is a work in progress right now, and we don't know what that's going to look like.
Okay, at the risk of turning this into like Cam's rants. So like two things. The one, I don't know why we make this distinction between academic labs somehow being like the bad place to have things and like, whatever. Like this makes absolutely no sense. We have great labs solving big problems and there are great learnings in there. I also like, what do we want to turn like Rich Sutton's like deep fundamental reinforcement learning lab into like something else? Like, no, we want to have like the Einstein of our time just keep being Einstein and producing results like that. So like what, like this like dichotomy makes no sense to me in one way. And then the second part to this is, I get it. We're talking about the strategy came out, and so we're going to keep talking about the government. But like, unless corporate Canada decides to like buck up and take part in this, like it doesn't matter what strategy the government comes out with. It doesn't matter how much money they pour into it. We're never going to be able to pour in as much as corporate Canada can and should as capital allocators. And so if we want to have from this be a success in the country and we want more opportunities in labs, a very simple thing is just having companies more opportunities in industry, have companies create more opportunities in industry. Like Corey talked about it, like hire more, pay more, like keep those people here. Everybody south of the border wants to hire them, but like north of the border, we're like, I don't know, why are they leaving? Is there a government program that will fund me to make them stay? This is not a winning solution. So great, like the government came out with an ambitious strategy. There's some things that people are going to like and dislike about it, and there's some buttons they're going to try and push. None of that matters if corporate Canada doesn't decide to actually get behind this, invest in the area, and stop just waiting for the government to pay them to do something to keep talent north of the border. This is like full stop. All right, enough of my rants.
Yeah. And you could argue that actually the government programs actually crowd things out. I was on a sales call this morning and they're like, well, maybe I should apply for one of these programs. Maybe I should go to Prairies Can. Maybe you should do this. And we love the RDIs. It's all good. But it's like there's such a tiny amount of money, and it almost hurts the private sector, because everybody goes, okay, well, we've trained corporate Canada to go look for a government program and go jump through all these hoops, right? So, it would be interesting sometimes can you design the programs in a different way, right? But Ava, at risk of being a complete fanboy, I'd say MyTax is the one program that does seem to work. I mean, would love to see things more streamlined, make it easier on the profs, make it easier on that. But like, hey, you know what? If there was a matching or even more substantial, we would hire double the students if there was more that came through in that space, right? And so let's not reinvent a new program, but let's lean into existing programs, talk about how we improve them, right? And then, you know, there are incentives for dollars that do work there, right? So cheers up. Talk to my tax, right?
Fast matching programs tend to be the ones that are low friction. Fast matching programs tend to be the best ones, in my opinion, as far as like government programs that are helpful.
Corey, we love a fan. Thank you. And I would have had to plug MyTex there, but thank you so much. I do think MyTex is a good solution for that question. Canada produces world-class AI talent. What determines whether that talent stays and contributes here versus leaving? I know we discussed money. What are the other factors apart from money?
It's opportunity, right? You know, if my student is graduating, they want to go change the world. And if they see the opportunity here, they will stay here. They love it here. But if they don't see the opportunity here, or it's just too hard because if they move, you know, a few hundred miles to the south, it becomes easier, you know, they don't love us that much. Right? A lot of these students are coming from all over the world and they come to Canada to study. And particularly today, they really want to come to Canada to study. And we need to make sure that there are opportunities when they graduate and that if they have ideas, that they can really turn those ideas into practice. And so we need to help support them in doing that.
And Margot, oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, Lisa.
Okay, I was going to say I totally agree with Margot said, and I just want to add on to it. And one of the barriers that AI talent face in Canada, especially if they're coming from overseas to study in Canada or to do research in Canada, is the immigration process. You know, again, to be really honest, it's incredibly challenging for students who come here on a student visa to find a way to stay in the country. It's incredibly challenging for them to get here in the first place, to get their student visa in the first place, let alone to stay. And so we have to fix that.
And we've let a few strip mall colleges. Like, I don't understand who's not watching this stuff, right? Like, if you've graduated from a real university, you should automatically have a work permit and a path to citizenship. I've got probably 20 people in my company right now that are trying to get their PR. It's insane what they have to go through, right? And those are the people we want to be new Canadians. But yet on the other side, we have like the strip mall colleges and people come in and never actually go to school, right? And so that we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's fix that problem. But Margaret, you said something beforehand that was bang on. Like, people actually do care about the purpose of their projects, right? Like, we make money in like blue collar industries and we burn it in health. Health is the most purposeful, most meaningful projects. It's also the hardest industry, right? But if I can get access to a unique data set in oncology, that first job, that master's that comes out that stays, they will stay and work on those projects if they've got something with a great team and an interesting problem. Now, there's limits to that though, and our hope is that they meet a boy or a girl, they buy a condo, they put down roots like that. I mean, I'm from Edmonton. That's why people are staying in Edmonton. They come for the U of A and like, I was going to be there for 6 months and shit, I never left, right? But like after 3 years, then eventually your partner on the other side says, wait a minute, you can make 50 grand or 100 grand more somewhere else. And then it's money. So it's like, you know, draw them in with purpose and the quality of life, but then we need to solve the dollars.
And let me just be clear, sitting in British Columbia and Vancouver, you know, you can add an order of magnitude to that challenge, right? It's hard enough for our graduate students to eat while they're in the graduate program, but they actually do want places to live and to eat after as well. And so I do think the discrepancy, I've had multiple students take leaves from their very successful graduate programs to go spend time in the US. And it wasn't because they liked what was happening there, right? It was all about they couldn't afford to stay here and finish their degree. They're all going to graduate eventually, but it took a little bit longer.
Yeah. Money, opportunity, livable cities. Those are like the three things.
Okay. So I do apologize. There's some other questions in the chat. I am looking at my schedule and I think it is time to close. So thank you very much for all the questions. I did want to say a huge thanks to all of our panelists, to Alyssa, to Cam, to Margot, to Chad, to Corey, to Yusuf. Thank you so much for all of your perspectives today. It's been a very enriching discussion. Thank you for answering the questions. And then just in closing, so when Canada launched its national AI strategy, the goal was to build an enduring advantage. And today we've heard that that advantage is real. But sustaining it will require more than world-class research. It requires strong partnerships, faster adoption, successful commercialization, and a continued investment in people and our talent. If there's one message that emerged from today's discussion, it's that Canada's next chapter in AI won't be defined by what we invent alone. It will be defined by what we build, what we deploy, and the value we create for Canadians. So again, thank you so much to CSPC for hosting. Thank you so much to our outstanding panelists and for all of you in your interactions today. Thank you.